system that we then could use, and it's now pretty trivial for us to add new mounts once we get awesome art.
So, the beta is currently in progress right now. What would you say is the best or most important constructive feedback that you receive?
It can come in a couple different formats. I think player feedback is often too long. We're really busy, and just like any person reading, whether it's a bug report or a forum post, be concise, be brief. If people's eyes tend to glaze over if they have to go a few paragraphs. I mean, sometimes it requires that detail to adequately express yourself or to cover all the bases, but nearly always shorter is better. If you can explain something to us very quickly, it makes a good soundbite. It can be a bullet list on the meeting notes for a design meeting or something like that. We always ask players to keep it in perspective. We don't hate your class. We're not out to get you. You're not neglected. We have a lot we want to do and a lot of mouths to feed, so to speak. So I'm not asking anyone to cut us some slack, but just kind of keep it in perspective, that telling us you noticed a problem or you wish something was changed is awesome. You don't need to follow that up with, and it's obvious you don't understand our class and you're always out to get us and nobody on your staff plays warlocks or whatever. That doesn't help anything. It doesn't make their arguments stronger, and it usually just ends up making them silly. And they risk that their message will get missed inside all of the whining.
Now, after game launch, is this sort of feedback just as important or perhaps more important?
Oh, it's funny. Our job is never done. I think there's an expectation sometimes that it's sacred once it's done. It's locked in. Okay, your talent tree is not going to change for 12 months or however long it takes us to make another expansion. But the fact is, if we see something's not working, we'll be quick to change it. Now, we know that too much of that leaves players with what I call the whiplash experience. We screwed up a little bit with the hunter balance when we immediately drove all of the Beastmaster hunters to survival, or I can't remember what it was at the time. We did a little bit of that with mages too. We have to be super careful. We don't want players to constantly be chasing our ever-changing design. But we do want to fix things that are broken. It's easier to make sweeping changes in an expansion. I think players almost expect it and kind of get a little disappointed if they don't see a lot of change for their class. So expansion is the best time to do it, but you sometimes get the sense that players are, they're dreading the patch coming because that's it. That's the end of their changes and no more work will ever be done. But we have a pretty good capacity to hot fix things, which means changing them on the client, on the server without requiring a whole new client patch. We also can make fast patches, and we're having to patch things all the time. That doesn't mean that we're sloppy and we don't know how to program. It just means that something didn't work the way we expected, or in the meantime we thought of a better way to do it, or whatever. So it's one of the beauties of working on a massively multiplayer game. In my previous career, we would come up with an idea, and it might be a year before we'd see it implemented. And on World of Warcraft, literally sometimes you can think of a change, and it'll be in the game that afternoon. And so we don't view... I think... when I first started, I viewed a class as like, there's a perfect form out there, and you'll eventually iterate your way towards it. Kind of like the artist carving away marble to get at the sculpture underneath it. Eventually, the perfect form will emerge. But I don't think it's a destination anymore. It's a journey, and we will constantly be tweaking things until we're happy with them. And then as we tweak the talent in the 5th tier, the one in the 3rd tier will start to look kind of stale and old, and maybe it's time to update that one. So we don't look at things as finished. We look at them as like, how does it feel today? The game evolves. There's new types of encounters out there. There's going to be a huge emphasis on battlegrounds in Cataclysm, so we're going to have to look at some abilities that we perhaps didn't have to look at before because they didn't have a big role in smaller scale PvP. That's the long-winded way of saying it's a product that just keeps on going, and we don't view milestones as anything is particularly locked down. It's just the next step. Players are going to get to see something new, and then the next day we'll go in and change something else.
On a sort of final note, you have a long history of promising various mounts to our World of Warcraft player base: a pony, a moose, and now a camel. Promises aside, what sort of cool new mounts might our players be able to look forward to as Cataclysm progresses?
I'll tell you, it's getting kind of hard. We look around at like, what animals haven't we tapped yet? Oh, let's make the llama or the muskox or whatever. And I just, we keep racking our brains. It was kind of a miracle that we had not yet tapped the lion, and that we came up with the scorpion guild mount. Before the scorpion, we were messing around with what are those things called? The lightning lizards in the barrens.
Thunder lizards.
The thunder lizards, yeah. But to make those work, we had to take their Stegosaurus-like plates off, and then they didn't look like thunder lizards anymore. So had to kill that mount. And then, the scorpion. Can we make the scorpion work? There's a lot of concern about, as you're riding along, is the stinger constantly like poking you in the back of the neck? But they pulled it off. It looks awesome. It's a really exciting mount. And so, gosh, could we make a spider mount that looks pretty cool? That seems possible. Funny mounts are fun as long as they don't cheapen, the world for players. You don't want to overdo that too much of the giant penguin mount or the ostrich mount or whatever, but...
Shark mount might be a possibility.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, and we'll see a little when Vashir goes live with the seahorses and stuff, maybe there's a room to have aquatic mounts, so that you have your flying mount, your ground mount, and maybe you have your underwater mount, and then gosh, marine biologist here, we could come up with all sorts of eels and lobsters and sharks and all sorts of crazy things to ride around underwater. You can see the very slow-moving giant sea cucumber mount would be awesome.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's been great to have you here, and I'm sure our players are very excited about Cataclysm.
I am. I can't wait to go play it after spending so much time working on it.
It's been a pleasure, and I think that about wraps it up.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for the questions today. A big thank you to Alex, Corey, Russell, Derek, Andrea, and Greg for their time and insight, and to all of our listeners for downloading this episode of BlizzCast. See you next time.
BlizzCast, your official Blizzard podcast.